Hello, and welcome to Stories for Sleep Tonight. Our journey takes us to the height of the Cold War, a time of quiet, simmering tension between two global superpowers. We are traveling to a place that was at the time they are bubbles of order, where every movement is monitored, every event is logged, and the sky itself is under constant surveillance. What they saw, touched, and recorded would become one of the most well-documented and credible UFO encounters in history. A case often referred to as Britain's Roswell. Our story tonight is about what happens when something truly inexplicable penetrates that bubble. It is a quiet, procedural mystery that has remained unexplained for decades. An island of American military power set down in the heart of the old English countryside. Royal Air Force Base Bentwaters in the dense dark pine forest of Suffolk. The forest that surrounds the base, Rendlesham Forest, is a dense, dark sea of trees. Suddenly, the quiet of your shift is broken by a call over the radio. The normal night sounds of the woods have fallen silent. The air seems to buzz with a strange, static electricity. Up ahead, through the dense trees, you can see a light that is not a fire. After some time, without any warning and without a sound, the object begins to lift from the forest floor. But for you and the other men, the quiet is different now. It is filled with the weight of an impossible memory. A shared experience that has no place in any military training manual. The first night of the Rendlesham Forest Incident is over, but the mystery has just begun. It maneuvers silently between the trees, and then, in an instant, it accelerates into the night sky, disappearing at a speed that defies all known principles of aerodynamics. It is a pulsing, multicolored light, casting strange, moving shadows on the forest floor. A security patrol at the East Gate has reported seeing strange lights in the sky, descending into the forest just beyond the base perimeter. There is no need to be alarmed, no need to solve this puzzle. You approach the object cautiously. It feels warm to the touch. You notice strange, glyph-like symbols etched into its surface, symbols that resemble ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. As you circle the craft, your radio begins to malfunction, and you have the distinct, unsettling feeling that time itself is slowing down, the moment stretching into a strange, elastic silence. You and two other security policemen are ordered to investigate. You leave your vehicle and proceed on foot into the dark, cold woods. And there, resting silently on the ground, is the source of the light. It is a small, metallic craft. It is triangular in shape, about 9 feet long at the base, and perhaps 6 feet high. It is smooth, black, and appears to be made of a single piece of seamless material. It glows with a soft, pulsing red and blue light, but it makes no sound. The only sounds are the crunch of your boots on the frozen pine needles and the whisper of the wind. Your only task is to listen to the calm recounting of this strange and fascinating story, and to allow its steady, unhurried pace to guide you toward rest. Military bases, especially those containing sensitive assets, are places of extreme security and rigid routine. In the cold, quiet days after Christmas in 1980, a series of events would unfold in the forest just outside the base, events witnessed not by excitable civilians, but by trained United States Air Force personnel. This is not a story of speculation, but one of official reports, witness testimony from trained observers, and even an audio recording made during the event. 1980. You are a young airman in the United States Air Force, stationed at RAF Bentwaters, far from home during the quiet lull of the Christmas holidays. Your duty tonight is a routine security patrol, the familiar rhythm of driving the perimeter of the base, the landscape of Suffolk, England, dark and quiet around you. Let the world outside grow quiet. So, I invite you to settle in. Imagine yourself now. It is late, in the deep hours of the morning of December 26th. The air is cold and crisp, thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. The initial assumption is a practical one. An aircraft has crashed. The response is procedural. As you move deeper into the forest, you notice the air feels different. You are witnessing something else entirely. You and your fellow airmen emerge into a small clearing. As trained observers, you and your colleagues begin a methodical examination. You are not witnessing a crash. The light is gone. The forest is quiet once more. The report filed by the airmen on patrol, detailing their close encounter with a strange triangular craft, was met with the kind of quiet disbelief one might expect from a military command structure. A downed aircraft was one thing. A silent, unknown object covered in glyphs was another entirely. Halt was a career military officer, a man who dealt in facts, figures, and procedure. He was, by his own account, a firm non-believer in unidentified flying objects. The report from his men was, in his view, an anomaly to be explained away through logical, conventional means. The initial explanation from base leadership was that the men had likely been disoriented and had mistaken the rhythmic flash of the nearby Offord Ness lighthouse for something more mysterious. Porter's voice on the tape calmly documents his confirmation of the 3 indentations in the ground in a triangular pattern where the object had apparently landed. As they are examining the site, the strange lights return. He describes it breaking apart into 5 smaller white objects, which then fly away at incredible speed. Later, he describes seeing other lights in the sky, far to the north, performing sharp, angular turns. The focus of the investigation now turned from the fleeting lights in the sky to the tangible, physical traces left behind in the forest clearing. The most significant pieces of physical evidence were the marks on the ground where the object had allegedly rested. Investigators found 3 distinct indentations in the hard, frozen soil, forming a near-perfect equilateral triangle. The radiation readings that Colonel Halt had taken on the night of his investigation were not an anomaly. Teams that returned to the site in the daylight of the following morning confirmed his findings. The indentations on the ground, skeptics argued, were not from the landing gear of a craft, but were simply rabbit scrapes or animal burrows, which are common in any forest. The radiation readings, the most difficult piece of evidence to explain away, have been attributed to a number of possibilities, from a faulty measuring device to natural deposits or even contamination from an unknown source. Using more sophisticated equipment, they recorded levels of beta radiation within the 3 landing indentations that were reportedly 7 to 8 times higher than the normal background radiation of the surrounding forest. On one hand, there were the accounts of multiple, trained military observers, supported by an audio recording, plaster casts, and verified radiation readings. On the other, there was a collection of plausible, if not entirely satisfying, explanations that sought to ground the entire event in the familiar and the known. The truth of what happened in Rendlesham Forest remained suspended between these 2 poles, in a state of deep and lasting ambiguity. This was a measurable physical anomaly, a detail that was far more difficult to dismiss than a simple story of strange lights. Each depression was about 7 inches in diameter and a few inches deep. The primary counter-argument, and the one most often cited by debunkers of the incident, was the Offord Ness lighthouse. Located several miles away on the coast, its powerful, rhythmic beam swept across the area. Skeptics argued that the airmen, unfamiliar with the local geography and perhaps disoriented in the dark forest, had simply mistaken the lighthouse beam for something more exotic. They suggested that unusual atmospheric conditions, such as temperature inversions, could have refracted the light, making it appear to hover, dance, and even descend into the trees. The soil within them was heavily compressed, as if a great weight had been applied from above. Plaster casts were made of these marks, preserving them as physical evidence. The question was no longer just what the men had seen, but what evidence existed to support their extraordinary claims. There were scuffs and scrapes on the bark facing the landing site, and some reports even mentioned that the sides of the trees facing the clearing seemed to have been exposed to a strange warmth or radiation. And at one point, sending down a narrow, focused beam of light to the ground, alarmingly close to the base, near the highly sensitive weapons storage area. Halt's voice, still professional, now carries an undercurrent of genuine bafflement. He begins to describe what he is seeing in real time. He speaks of a bright reddish-orange light moving through the trees. He describes it pulsating and appearing to drip what looks like molten metal. He then directs his team to take radiation readings. He notes a positive reading on his Geiger counter, stating on the tape that the levels in the center of the landing site are significantly higher than the background. He returned with a tape recording of his own impossible encounter, a calm, professional voice documenting an event that had no place in the ordered world of military procedure. The mystery of Rendlesham Forest now had an official, undeniable record. At the center of this official skepticism was the deputy base commander, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt. This time, Colonel Halt decided he would lead a small party into the forest himself. As Halt and his team ventured into the forest, his voice is calm, professional, and methodical. He can be heard directing his men, taking notes, and maintaining a military-style log of the events. His intention was not to find a UFO, but to debunk the escalating rumors, to find the rational explanation he was sure existed, and to restore a sense of order to his command. To document his investigation, he brought with him a portable microcassette recorder. This recording would become one of the most famous and compelling pieces of evidence in the history of the subject. But the phenomenon was not a one-time event. On the following night, December 27th, the lights returned. A new set of personnel witnessed a strange, pulsing light in the sky, hovering over the forest before disappearing. The story was no longer just the account of a few enlisted men. It was becoming a persistent and unsettling presence. On the third night, December 28th, the lights were back again. The audio recording, now known as the Halt tape, captures the events of that night with a stark and chilling clarity. They first arrive at the small clearing from the encounter 2 nights prior. It is at this point that the tone of the investigation begins to shift. The tape records him and his men tracking the object as it moves out over a nearby field, where it hovers silently. Lieutenant Colonel Halt had gone into the forest to find a rational explanation, to debunk a wild story. With Colonel Halt's testimony and audio recording, the Rendlesham Forest Incident moved from the realm of anecdotal sighting to a documented military event. In the days following the initial events, the small clearing in the forest became a site of careful, methodical investigation. Furthermore, some of the pine trees surrounding the clearing showed signs of unusual damage. This brings us to the most scientifically intriguing piece of evidence. But for every piece of extraordinary evidence, a skeptical and mundane explanation was proposed. As for the physical evidence, the explanations were more prosaic, and so the case became a quiet battle between extraordinary testimony and ordinary probability. Faced with a collection of contradictory evidence, extraordinary testimony from his own men, and his own baffling experience, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt did what a commanding officer is trained to do. He filed a report and procedural summary of the events that had occurred on the nights of the 26th and 28th of December. After a cursory review, they concluded that the events, while admittedly unexplained, were of no defense significance. But in 1983, through the use of the US Freedom of Information Act, researchers were able to obtain a copy of Halt's memo. Its release to the public transformed the incident. It was no longer just a story. It was a documented event, confirmed by an official source. For believers, Rendlesham is one of the most compelling cases in history. A clear instance of an extraterrestrial visitation witnessed by dozens of trained observers whose testimony has remained consistent for decades. For skeptics, it remains a classic case of misperception, a story of men on a dark night mistaking the distant, sweeping beam of a lighthouse for something more fantastic. Their interpretation compounded by suggestion and the tense atmosphere of a Cold War airbase. As the lights and the object were not deemed to be a hostile threat to the United Kingdom, the official position was that no further investigation was warranted. The official memos are now just historical documents, filed away in quiet archives. The Cold War tensions that formed the backdrop of the event have dissolved into the past. The case was, for all official purposes, closed. The only lights are soft and familiar. The only sounds are the gentle rhythms of your own breathing. The mystery of Rendlesham Forest remains, but it is not yours to solve tonight. It is a story built on the solid foundation of official documents and the credible testimony of trained military professionals. Yet, it is a story about an event that, according to our known understanding of the world, should not have happened. It is a quiet case study in how official institutions respond to events that fall far outside of expected categories. All that is left is the quiet and the gentle invitation to sleep, and how a story can grow from a strange light in a forest into an enduring international legend. It detailed the initial sighting of the object descending into the forest, the investigation of the alleged landing site, the discovery of the 3 indentations, and the positive radiation readings. It also included a summary of the strange aerial phenomena witnessed by Halt and his own team on the third night. It was an official military document, signed by a high-ranking officer, that seemed to confirm a close encounter with a tangible, unidentified object. In January of 1981, about 2 weeks after the events, he drafted a formal memorandum to the British Ministry of Defence. The memo, titled simply Unexplained Lights, was a calm, factual. The response from the British Ministry of Defence, however, was one of quiet dismissal. For several years, the story remained a quiet, internal affair, a piece of local base folklore. It was at this point that the Rendlesham Forest Incident became known as Britain's Roswell. The parallels were clear. It was a story involving a military base, multiple highly credible military witnesses' reports of a landed craft and physical evidence, and an official document that seemed to lend credence to the event, followed by a period of official denial and secrecy. To this day, the debate continues. Conclusion: the Rendlesham Forest Incident is, in the end, a perfect historical mystery. But the strange lights over the forests of Suffolk faded long ago. Here, in the stillness of your room, the world is quiet and comprehensible. Let the unexplained lights fade into the darkness of the past. Sleep now,